Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special simulcast podcast. It's the Neil Haley Show with a podcast called Doctales with Royal Doc Alan Lindeman. Doc, you're branching out. We were talking a lot about your medical career, but now we're going to interview some people, right? And talking about all these great tips you provide for pregnant women. But now it's time for a new podcast, right?
Well, that's what we're looking for. It's not actually, I mean, it's new, but it's in addition. It's not a replacement. So, yeah, we're happy about this. Thank you, Neil.
All right, so let's talk about what types of people we're gonna interview and how you're gonna kind of tell stories throughout these interviews, and really give your opinion more, so we get to really know the true rural doc.
Well, certainly I have a lot of opinions, and some of them are unpopular. But Doctales actually started about, I'd say probably 20 years ago. We actually had a website on it, and it was a story about patients and their encounters with the medical system. And sometimes it gets to be complicated in ways you wouldn't even imagine.
I'm sure I couldn't even imagine what you mean by that, the different things, but you saw things in the medical field that you were blown away, not understanding what you're getting yourself into, right?
Right. I can give you a couple examples. One of them was a young woman. She's about 25 years old. She came in to me. Well, actually, she presented to the emergency room 15 weeks pregnant. She had gotten a new blazer, and it was rolling toward a brick wall. And so she wanted to protect the bumper. So she placed herself between the blazer and the brick wall and crushed her pelvis when she was pregnant. So we had a lot of problems with that. We had bleeding. We had a dead baby. Um, and so we took her to the operating room and trying to stop the bleeding. And the anesthetist or the anesthesiologist says, "You have 15 minutes to close her, and I'm waking her up." So we really couldn't complete our procedure. And she was in the hospital over the weekend. I gave her 7 units of blood and sent her off to St. Paul eventually, which is where I had my residency. The nice thing is she lived, but it was kind of a one thing after the next that was a problem for her.
Wow. The stories, you can't believe them, right? That they happen, right? And that's why you started Doc Tales to begin with. When we talk to, when we're going to be talking to doctors, they're going to tell these stories about how we're lacking a lot of resources available to have good health care.
Well, this is one of the problems we have with healthcare deserts and obstetric deserts. And of course, this hospital I was practicing at wasn't a total desert, but there were things we didn't have, and one of them was good anesthesia.
Oh man, no, that's just not good to know good anesthesia. And you guys carry these medical insurance, malpractice insurance, things like that. Are hospitals good at covering things up in ways to make sure that they don't end up getting sued?
Well, every year this problem gets worse. I talked to one of my nurses a few years ago. She said they spent a lot of time in her training making sure that the nurses could lateralize responsibility or guilt. In other words, direct the guilt and the responsibility away from the hospital and onto the provider.
That's crazy stuff, for sure. And tell me another story, because again, I think that when people go to Doctales, the website's soon going to be up. People can check out some of these stories. Again, hopefully we republish a lot of them. They'll be great.
Well, thank you. Yes, I do have many more stories, but the one that comes to my mind now is a little bit tricky. This is, I got a call to the emergency room, and this was a different hospital. And the doctor calling me said, "Oh, we have a young girl, a 7-year-old girl, who fell on her bicycle." In other words, and it didn't have a seat. So the top of the bicycle went into her vagina. And that was the story I got. So on my way to the hospital, I'm thinking, as I'm driving, what is this? What is the real problem here? Because it didn't sound realistic at all to have an accident like that. Well, as it turns out, she was sexually molested by her older brother, and the top of her vagina was broken. I had to do surgery on her to close that. And the biggest problem was that we had a hard time getting anybody to recognize that it was a problem. In other words, we had trouble getting social service involved. And then she went home, and unfortunately, she went back into that same situation. And so I called the police. I said, "What kind of protection do I have for this man? What kind of protection do my children have?" Because he was calling my house on my children's phone. And they said the same protection that we have, which is nothing. So we were kind of afraid for a while what was going to happen. And about 6 months later, I got a phone call from him saying, "You're right, Dr. Lindeman, I did that. But in the meantime, the family had moved out of state. And of course, the criminal part of this would only go as far as the border of the state. So as it turned out, we got the young girl fixed up from a physiologic point of view, but I don't know what happened to her as far as a mental point of view, and I don't know what was ever done to her brother. So yeah, you see things that you'd like not to see.
Oh, absolutely, you do, and it's sad, isn't it? Really, what happens?
Well, it's sad and it's scary, and it's an example of what sometimes doesn't work in healthcare.
All right. Well, the best place people can find information now is at ruraldocallen.com and also safepregnancy.com, and now Doctales where is it, doctales.com or
Yes, it is. It's doctales.com, Neil.
all right. Well, we appreciate it. The inaugural podcast guests galore coming. Be ready. And thanks again, Doc.
Thanks a lot, Neil.
All right. That was the Rural Doc Allen Doc Tales podcast. Take care, guys.